outline before we start getting into the agenda. So we will follow up on some questions and some comments that we received both at the first work session as well as follow-up in the days that followed the first work session. And then we'll get into the topics of tonight's meeting. We'll talk to you about your walkability projects that are included in the budget ordinance. We'll also talk about the property management projects that are included in that ordinance to give you the wayfinding project and to help answer some of the confusion that we introduced, but also to help further refine why we talked to you about requested and recommended budgets. And then finally, we've got some follow-up regarding the alley activation project that came up as specific questions in the first work session. So as far as how to find information in the budget, I've titled the next few slides as Navigating the Budget. This page A1, this is your budget at a glance. This is going to identify where your operating revenue is coming from. It's going to identify where your operating revenue is going to. So when I say where the operating revenue is going to, it's going to let you know what departments that revenue is going to. This also tells you about the capital revenues, but the details on the capital revenues as far as the individual funding streams and the projects that they are going to is in the recommended capital budget section. For as big a document as this is, these 5 pages right here are all you are going to be voting on June 7th. And so what we are trying to do is we're trying to get you to understand what we have put into this budget. Now, you may like what's in the budget and you may adopt that, and that's okay with us. You may not like what's in the budget. But what we want to do is put you in a position where you can, if you don't like what's in there, you have enough information where you can revise it. What we don't want to do is have a competition where it's our budget versus your budget. It's your budget. We're just trying to get you educated on it, so either you're good with it or you have enough information where you can modify it. When it comes to the recommended operating budget, so that's going to be in Section B. This is the budget that is being recommended to the board. It does not represent everything that a department requested. That is in Section C. And I'm highlighting the police department in particular because you should know that that department requested 2 police officers. This recommended budget, because of funding constraints, recommends 1 police officer to be funded at mid-year. And so I want to make sure that it's very clear with the board that what is being recommended is not what was requested. So we're trying to be transparent. And then finally, this is the capital budget. At the bottom of the last page of Section E, you're going to see a pie chart there. And that shows you where the revenue is coming from and where it's going to within the capital budget. This, I think, is going to be useful for you is, for example, if you want to change a scope of a project or you want to drop a project, it can let you know what funds have been freed up and what funds can then be applied to a different project. There are some projects in here that are funded by restricted revenue. And so if you drop a project and those funds then become available, you can only use it for certain purposes. So that's probably the biggest practical use of this chart, is to know if you free up funds by dropping a project and those funds are restricted, you're going to be restricted in what you can use it for as an alternate project.
Does it show somewhere in Section E what ones are restricted and what ones are not?
Yep. So welcome to the world of staff of having to work with me. Let's see if I can go back. You will see in Section E, let me break it out for you. Those revenue streams are color-coded.
Right, but none of them say restricted.
I'm getting ready to explain that. Okay, if you go to the last page, which is E8, go to the bottom of the page and you'll see revenue sources. And those revenue sources have a color-coded background. Those revenue sources that have the purple background, those are restricted.
Just the light purple?
Yes.
All right, so when you go over the pie chart, says fleet expenditures, that's dark purple, but that's completely different.
Yeah, that's where that's just expenditures. But
Okay.
The revenue, if it has purple, that indicates that that's a restricted revenue source.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, as far as one of the items specifically that came up in work session one, I specifically did a good job of making it confusing. The requested budget for wayfinding is not what you saw for recommended. And it could and probably came across that we changed the scope, but the scope wasn't changed. What the reality is that we are a very lean staff, and so we are putting staff into positions that they're probably not used to. So each of us have a strength, and my particular strength is I've got an awful lot of experience in design and construction. And because I've constructed a wayfinding project, I know that the revenue estimate or the expenditure estimate that was put forward to you is not going to be adequate. And the reason I say that is you'll see in the memo for the wayfinding that the average price for the signs is around $6,600. That's probably a good price, especially when you take a look at some of the wayfinding that has been done by municipalities around us. But that's going to be representative of, if you look at the cursor, of a sign like that. It's not going to be adequate to reflect the cost for the interchange wayfinding signs that is proposed in here. Based on my experience, those could range from anywhere between $10,000 and $12,000 a piece. And if you do 2 at each interchange, actually the budget is not going to be enough to fund that. So I just want to be real clear that the scope is the same. It's just that the estimate was bumped up because those interchange signs, if you choose to do it, are much more expensive. The other reason to show the change is I doubt in this job market, in this construction market, that you're going to get anyone to show interest in a project that is for $36,000. It's probably going to have to be at least $50,000 to get someone who's interested. So that's the other reason for the revision in the estimate. We had one other follow-up item from work session one, but let me just check in to see if there's any questions on the wayfinding in particular. Okay. We had a question about alley activation before I turn it over to Sheila, who's also going to then roll into talking about walkability. Let me share with you, because you're going to see this in Chris's presentation. There are items that we will briefly talk about, which are future projects, and those are just to give you a heads up. We'll talk in greater detail at a later time about that. Those are also mentioned just to let you know that the budget you've got is just this year, but it's part of a continuum, so don't spend all your money this year. You got to be thinking about projects for the future, but that's why we talk about future. But again, as I mentioned with the police position, we're going to talk to you about projects that are unfunded. And we just took a risk analysis, and some of the things that we thought were going to be higher probability of risk, we put into the recommended, and those that we thought were going to be a lower probability of risk, we did not recommend. But they still could possibly be needed this coming year. So that's why we wanted to share with you the unfunded. But that's not to be confused with a future project. So with that, I will turn it over to Sheila to talk about alley activation as well as walkability.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to follow up with you about our alley activation discussion from last week and some requests to determine additional costs to provide 50 amp service on the 200 block of Arundel Avenue in our downtown. But I wanted to first take the opportunity to recognize our board and our community for being or for getting the support from Congressman David Price. So we submitted a request to the community project appropriation fund, and we are fortunate for the 4th District. Our project was selected to be recommended to the Federal Budget Review Committee for funding. So it's not solidified, but I do think it is important to recognize that others see the value in your strategic plan and in the work that you have already begun. And this request was for about $700,000, and the request included continuing alley activation. It included some wayfinding specific to our downtown and support of our downtown businesses. It included public art, as well as acquiring property downtown for parking and some kind of lower scale electrical infrastructure work. So there's a lot piled into that $700,000. It will go very quick. We won't know probably until the fall if it is funded, but I do think it's important to recognize you guys for the support of these projects and your vision, and that other people support it as well. So with that, I wanted to follow up. There was a request on what it would cost to do a 50 amp access and if we had capacity on the 200 block. And so we do have capacity to pull in a 50 amp service we have support on Sycamore Street that services on Arundel. And so we do have the power or enough power service there to pull in another 50 amp service. So the cost of one additional 50 amp service would be approximately $4,000. And that includes a little bit of contingency. This is a little bit of a wild construction market right now. So we are just including a little bit of contingency in that project as well. So we do feel, as long as everything goes smooth, again, like I said, it's a little bit of a wonky construction world. So we feel confident that we're going to be able to do the existing scope and have remaining funds to move forward with the existing budget that we've provided us for alley activation and downtown electrical infrastructure. So we think we'll be able to do that. And as I mentioned last week, we'll be looking to roll over funds that are budgeted in this year to next year to be able to fund that project, in addition to beginning our journey into Wi-Fi in our downtown. So if you have any questions, happy to answer those. Okay. All right. All right, so now we're going to go into Walk Zebulon. So this is a committee. This year it was Planning Director Mike Clark, Public Works Director Chris Ray, and myself. And as we start with any process, we look to our strategic plan and we try to identify how our committee fits into our strategic plan. So for Vibrant Downtown, projects that we look at are activation and connection of alleys, identify ways to slow traffic in our downtown so that we have a more walkable downtown. We also have small town life, and so specifically noted in small town life was that you wanted to improve walkability. We talked about activating alleys in your budget retreat last year, or not your board retreat last year, and connecting North Arundel and surrounding residential neighborhoods to downtown. And We talked about that in our budget process last year, and you've seen that already moving forward this year. Growing smart, so implementing wayfinding and branding. We've talked about how that walkability ties into your wayfinding. Traffic mitigation, as well as attracting private investment. So a review of the current budget year. So we focused on that connection of Arundel Avenue and the residential area there to our downtown. And so we focused on the missing links on Arundel Avenue. So we did the section of missing sidewalk from Gannon to Lee. We also did our first stamped crosswalk at North Street. And let's see. So for Walk Zebulon, in addition to our strategic plan, part of Growing Smart is working with our community to help make our plans. And so in 2019, I'm not going to go in a lot of detail about that study because we've talked about it in a work session and throughout the past year or two. But I just wanted to highlight the things that stood out that helped guide us to the project that we're recommending for this year. And so in 2019, when we reached out to our community members, we heard that the biggest barriers to walking were the lack of sidewalks, the amount of traffic, and driver habits. When we asked where people wanted to walk to, what destinations, we heard downtown, parks, restaurants, and shopping. And we also heard that people wanted to see us connect gaps, and again, we heard downtown in further questioning. You also heard in a work session, we had some downtown stakeholder discussions last fall, early winter. And the hot topics that were discussed with you that were shared by those stakeholders in those conversations included walkability, parking, and destination development. And so we tried to combine a lot of this knowledge that we've received from our community members and how it fit into a strategic plan to come up with some goals as we worked forward through our Walk Zebulon proposal. So the goals that we wanted to accomplish with our walkability project, the first one is to address gaps in sidewalk around downtown. We also wanted to maximize connectivity opportunity and support downtown development efforts. So why would we focus on downtown? And this may be difficult to see on your screen, but I think these two images are very telling. These are also images that we used as we made our proposal to Congressman David Price. So the image on your left shows the lines in yellow are where you currently have sidewalk or walkable surfaces around your downtown. And so what you'll see is where you are completely missing sidewalk is on the western side of Sycamore Street. So there's still some gaps on the other side streets, but that street is completely missing sidewalk opportunity. And so that's where we started to shift our focus, but we also recognized there were some service opportunities. There are access to faith-based or opportunities. There's access to services that would support some of our families that are in the surrounding neighborhoods and in the housing authority in a walkable manner. We also recognize that as Gannon continues to get busier and busier, as we want people to walk to our downtown and through our downtown, giving them more walkable opportunity off of that busy road would be a safer option as well as an easier option for the walker. And so that's another reason why we look to that Sycamore Street. The image on your right is an image that we worked with our planning department. And so we worked to recognize what are the housing units, the dwelling units in a walking distance of our downtown. And then what are the values of those homes? And so what you'll see is the homes that are a lighter shade of green are homes of a lower value, and the ones of the darker shade they're increasing. And you also will see in the shades of blue and purple within this walking distance, which is 0.3 miles of our downtown, those are subsidized housing and housing authority properties. So in total, there are 326 housing dwelling units as well as 75 that would fall in that subsidized and housing authority units. And so we wanted to make sure that we are working in sync with our downtown development efforts to provide this catalyst for access to not just your parks and not just downtown, but access to services, access to food, and most importantly, access to jobs. So our hope is to create an environment that will attract investors, that will bring job opportunities for those that could benefit the most from the job opportunities that we could bring in. Another thing that you will see is there are a total of 57 public parking spaces on Sycamore Street. And so that includes the west and eastern side of Sycamore Street. And that's something that we hear a lot of, is that there's a challenge with parking in our downtown. If we fully recognize the amount of side street parking that we have, and we use directional signage, we've seen some smaller scale directional signage go up, but that will help. Educating and creating an environment that feels walkable will be more inviting for parking, for people to use those side streets as public parking. So that is another reason why you saw, or why we gravitated towards Sycamore Street. So the next slide here just shows the area that we're talking about. So we are looking at this block of West Sycamore from Zebulon Drug to the church. And then we're also looking at doing stamped crosswalk at this intersection of Arundel and Sycamore. And I'm just gonna recap, just in case I left anything out, on why we feel these improvements are important. So we want to create strong visual indications of pedestrians for through traffic, such as tractor trailers. You're having, increasing your walkability, increasing that pedestrian traffic will do that naturally, but as well as having those visual barriers such as the stamped crosswalk will help. I'm not saying it's going to fix your problem 100%, but it helps add to that visual indication that you are going to have pedestrians in this area. We want to continue connections to services such as the food pantry at Zebulon United Methodist Church for residents living at nearby affordable housing communities. We want to enhance walkability to dwelling units near downtown. We want to highlight available on-street public parking available to downtown workers and visitors. Create and encourage alternative routes to walking on busier streets such as Gannon, and help enhance walkability to services located in and surrounding the downtown core. So this section of West Sycamore from Arundel to Church, it includes sidewalk installation, accessible and stamped crosswalks, and the total estimated cost is $315,000. In addition to Sycamore Street, we also are recommending that we move forward with an ADA transition plan. We would like to bring in a consultant to help us with that. You've probably recently seen this is a project that Wendell has been undergoing. Most recently, Nightdale, I believe, did it last year. So this is something that is required by the federal government. You are going to see, we're hearing an awful lot of chatter in the grant world with some of our comrades that help with those processes, that we anticipate having an up-to-date ADA transition plan is almost certainly going to be required for future funding. So as we go after federal funding and state funding, you're going to see more than likely requests for that. Very similar to the PARTIF process, they expect to see a Parks and Recreation master plan when you're applying. So just something that is the right thing to do. as we want to be more accessible and inclusive in our community, but it is also something that as we grow, we're going to need to seek funding partners for our projects. So what this process will do, it'll review town assets, identify ADA concerns, and provide us recommended actions and estimated costs to address those. So we expect that project to come in at about $15,000. And as Joe mentioned, we would like to just give you an idea because our CIP process, that P stands for plan. And so we want to be able to establish a plan for the years to come of what walkability could look like for our community. And so some of the projects that we've recommended for the future, and again, the plan is working, so they can always be addressed based on feedback that we get throughout the year and during the budget process. East Vance Street from the Housing Authority to the post office is an area that we think should be considered for sidewalk opportunity. There's also sidewalk repair on the 200 block of East Horton Street. One of the reasons you're not seeing that move forward fairly quickly is because as you do a streetscape plan, that might be something that you would tie in to that process. Pedestrian signal improvement, so Arundel Avenue and Vance Street is one area we would like to see signal improvements, as well as Arundel Avenue and Gannon. The Arundel Avenue and Gannon, there's just some tie-up in kind of what that intersection is going to look like in the future. So we know that something needs to be done there, and we would like to see that move forward as soon as possible. And we've also included stamped asphalt in our downtown corridor and leading to it. And we've talked about this. I'm not going to go in too great detail, but it is one of those things that if we say we want to be a walkable community and we say we want to attract investors, these are things, they're like that amenity that people are looking for, and it raises the bar on the caliber of investor that we're wanting to bring to our community. So when they see things like that, it makes them think, wow, this is what I'm going to expect in working in this community, and it just kind of elevates that potential partnership that we could have. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on this sidewalk from Arundel to Church Street? That just seems like an excessive amount of money.
Yeah. Give me just one moment to pull my cost estimate out. I'll do the best I can to answer the question, and then I may refer, just to give you a heads up, Chris, I may refer to you to help. So part of that cost estimate, about $60,000 of that is for engineering designs and permitting. Part of why we'll need some engineering designs is because we're going to be working within or close enough to Arundel Avenue, and so as we work with NCDOT, we're going to be required for certain sections to have engineered drawings.
Required to, I'm sorry.
We're going to be required to have engineered drawings as we work with NCDOT for encroachment agreements as we get close to Arundel Avenue. We also will have to include some surveying project oversight. There's going to be just kind of demolition of the area that we're going to want to install the concrete. There's going to be some traffic control measures. We're going to have to relocate some utility boxes and manholes, relocate some signs, as well as part of your cost is going to be, your stamped crosswalk as well.
Well, isn't there some sidewalk already there?
Not on West Sycamore.
I thought that there was beside Dufferham, for example, and the drugstore as well.
It's just right there at that corner of the drugstore is really all you've got.
But doesn't that pull you off of Arundel, which is the state road?
Yes, that would. But if you're going to be doing the Sycamore Street or the stamped crosswalk, you're going to have engineered drawings to work with NCDOT.
So do you have to have that if you paint crosswalks, or do you have to have it if you stamp crosswalks?
It's my understanding, Chris, you could help me out, but it's my understanding if we're doing anything within that space of the encroachment area of NCDOT's road, that we're gonna have to have engineer drawings. And Chris, yeah, he's nodded that we would have to have that.
For any type of just painting,
That,
that just seems excessive.
We have to get encouragement agreement. There is if we just strike it, there's a chance they might be able to, take encouragement
Chris.
agreement made, but any type of
Can,
construction.
can you step to the podium for us? Yeah.
You know you gotta get it up.
Currently, if we stamp it, it's gotta be engineered. There's not a doubt in my mind. If we just put thermoplastic crosswalk striping, they may take an application from it myself. But even some of the other small stuff that we've talked about, in the past, when I've talked to the district engineer, they want to see engineered drawings. They will not accept, something from a non-licensed engineer, even, something as simple as, a couple hundred linear feet of sidewalk. We tried to look at North Arundel Avenue this past year because we had some small sections and we just done a block. They said that was not acceptable for us to even come in and do it ourselves. They required engineered drawings.
Well, wouldn't it be less expensive an engineering cost if we were not doing, and I thought, look, I like stamping, so don't read between the lines on me, okay? But what I'm concerned about is the cost.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
And,
I think what you're seeing is a reflection of the construction market. It is extremely expensive right now. We also like engineering drawings that allow us to go out to bid, just so people have something to bid upon, have known quantities, elevations, make sure our grades are correct. So that is our pretty much standard procedure for something of this magnitude, is to have engineered drawings for bidding, as-built, insurance, the grades are right in compliance with ADA standards, and then, of course, NCDOT is the piece on the ice on the top.
along those same lines, though, it seems like a couple of years back, we did ADA slopes at those sidewalks.
Yeah, at the crosswalks at Rendell, yeah, those handicap ramps are there. Yes, those are in place. Those will be fine. We will not need to make any adjustment to them. It's any other ones that we're going to make on Church Street or crossing the alley there that used to go, it goes to the back of, what's the drugstore name? I can't remember what it is there.
I know what you're talking about.
But so there's several crosses through there. Bidding quantities, all those things, it's just standard procedure for us to have engineered drawings and stuff for bidding purposes. And then, of course, getting out DOT, milling, stamping, et cetera.
Well, I understand that milling and stamping cost a lot more. I get that.
We also have in the project, I will tell you, due to our limited staff, we're outsourcing construction inspection. That'll be all done by a third party. The development in this community is just not allowing us to free up our existing construction inspectors. They're fully dedicated to development projects. Trying to think of something else. We're carrying a very high contingency, and I think it's just a reflection of the market. This estimate was built after the estimates we took on North Arundel Avenue. So I hope we can come in cheaper. That's our goal, but the market is very strong right now and getting people just to bid. So I'll be glad to provide you my full detailed takeoff if you'd like to see it. But
Well, I think, I don't know how the board feels about any of this, but I think we're just casting about for ways to save money.
fully agree. Yeah, if there's opportunities that our engineer discovers from maybe what I've estimated, clearly we'll take a look at that and implement those. If I'm wrong and made a mistake in our estimate here, I'll be the first one to admit it and take the savings and run.
Oh, I get that. I'm not trying to throw stones. I'm just,
I know. It's high.
that just seemed like an excessive amount. And in fact, historically, and somebody would shoot me if they hear me say this, but it is the truth. I'm not saying it's the way it is today. The way we used to do sidewalks is they paid for the materials and we paid everything else. And that's the way the town put in sidewalks. So I'm not saying that's what we should do, it's because I don't want people throwing rocks at my house tonight. But I'm just telling you, way back in history, that's the way it was done.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So what's the cost of the stamping on this project?
The cost of the stamping of this project is estimated about $52,000.
Okay, thanks.
That's the stamping of the crosswalk, the striping, and the milling.
Yep, thanks.
thank you, Chris.
Yes, sir.
And I think that it's important to share that as we bid out this, I mean, something like the stamped crosswalk would be considered an alternative, just as you had with the North Arundel process. So that is something we would include as an alternative, and you can choose as we bid it out if you'd like to proceed with that scope of work when we contract it. Any other questions? Chris, you went a long ways to have to come back.
Let me first apologize for not saying good evening, Mayor, and the members of the board when I came up here earlier. Tonight, we want to talk a little bit about capital facility improvements. And I guess I'll show my age a little bit and tenure here. This has changed drastically over the years. You know, from where I guess back in 2007, we looked at the police and the town hall facility. We had about 12,000 square feet. Now, when I talk about the police facility and town hall, I talk about 35,000 square feet. So you almost 3 times a change in square footage that we operate, maintain, and keep up on a daily basis, over the last 10 to 12 years. And so it's just, for me, it's amazing to go back and look and see what we used to do and what we're having to do today. This first slide talks a little bit about that transition, that change, that growing up of how our community has grown. And now we're looking at 5 major facilities of town hall, police, the fire station, the public works facilities, and the community center. They range in age from 9 years old to 112. Well, I don't believe you'd probably know which one that's 9 years old, which is the Tot Lot. But I've got a pretty good idea which one the old one is, and that's the building we're standing in today. So that's a wide variety of different systems, different construction methods, different techniques that were used, and we have to adjust for all of that. Town hall is our largest one at 20,800 square feet. And we maintain almost 73,000 square feet. You know, I guess I'll tell another little story and show my age a little bit, but I remember when we used to have to maintain the lawns and the grounds at the police and town hall facility. A guy could go up there and do that in 30 minutes. He could take a push mower, a blower, a weed eater, and edger, and knock it all out in 30 minutes. Now to do town hall facility takes a 3-man crew all day to accomplish those same tasks. And if I look at those tasks and say, are they reasonable and all? I said, yes, that's the same task that each one of us are doing at our house on a weekly basis. So those tasks that we're doing here are very similar to the tasks we're doing at the house, but it's just changed so drastically over time due to the amount of square footage and acreage at the facility. So just for those who don't recognize this picture, this is a picture from 2008, and that's the entrance to the police station under construction. Facility maintenance and all is driven by life cycles, and we basically did this report in 2018, June of 2018. It looked at all the facilities, 5 major facilities in town, and looked at where some of the strengths and weaknesses were, and kind of projected out what some future needs were. The table to your left there is a screenshot that's from the manual. I'll be glad to give anybody this manual that we have. It does not have a copy of it, but it talks about life cycles. And one I point you a little bit to, because we'll be talking about it as we go through these slides, is item number 12, the heat pump and RTU. It talks about useful life of 12 to 14 years. And why that's important is they're recommending changing these units or pieces of equipment out every 12 to 14 years, because at that point, the depreciation curve, and if you remember some of the presentations from streets, the depreciation curve goes down the longer the years go out. We'll talk about that a little more next week, but it still applies here. The longer something goes out, the higher your maintenance costs are, and higher what your ultimate replacement cost will be. Two projects that we're going to talk about tonight that are recommended in Mr. Moore's budget is the police station HVAC. This facility is right at 15,000 square feet. It has 10 HVAC units on the top of the roof or mounted to the side. 5 of those were replaced in 2008, 2009 with the renovation, and now they're 14 years old in next fiscal years. So we are recommending to replace those 5 noted here. One of the things we are going to do to try to improve efficiency of these units is transition to gas. We have gas on Church Street, and rule of thumb is that gas will save you over electricity 30 to 40%. So we think this is a good recommended investment long term. We will also, as we go past these 5 units, knowing there's 5 more, we're going to size the line appropriately so that when we go to a change out, we just a matter of making that connection at time. We don't have to go back and upsize a distribution line through the facility. The construction estimate is $77,000. Design allowance $15,500. Contingency at 20% due to the uncertainty in the market, and with a total project cost of $110,000. Hearing no questions, we'll move to the next
Oh,
item.
I've got questions.
Yes.
I just
Yes,
wasn't
ma'am.
sure if you were
Yes, ma'am.
ready for them.
I'm
So,
sorry.
as we saw with the construction of the warming kitchen, what the project cost was estimated to be was not what the project cost was. I need to feel certain that this contingency is not going to be gone over, because I guarantee you it's going to be a problem if you come back to me and ask me for more money, because that's what the contingency is for. So this is the solid number.
In our professional opinion, at the time this estimate was done, I asked our electrical, mechanical, and plumbing engineer to help me with these estimates. He provided the construction estimates for us for this project. With that being said, this market is unstable. I recognize your comment. I fully recognize that we don't need to be coming back. We try to be conservative in our estimates. And for the warming kitchen, in reality, we never used it. So the additional funds that you did allocate, and I appreciate, we did not end up having to use. So we actually brought that project under budget and returning, I think, over $6,000 that we ended up doing. So it was a safety factor we put in, and thank goodness we didn't have to use it. We have tried to be conservative with these estimates and look at worst case. We've got a lot of experience in this building. We feel like this is the best, is a solid estimate, but I give you the most assurance that I can give you. I feel confident in the number. I feel confident in our engineer. And, you know, our goal is to hit these numbers. We're trying to be conservative.
So with moving from electric to gas, the gas units are more expensive?
It's not necessarily the gas units are more expensive. We got to put the gas piping in place. We have to pipe from the piping inside the building and run it along to where these units are and connect to those. I wouldn't say the gas unit was more expensive than electric. It's just the gas piping that we have to do to fire these units, and then we also have to vent these units to the roof. So there's the additional cost, not necessarily the units. But we'll get a return on investment from our electricity bill going down.
When do you expect to see the return on investment for the additional expenditure?
Typically, return on investment, something like this, is probably 5 or 6 years.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Thank you. Any others? Hearing none, we'll go to the next item recommended in Mr. Moore's budget is the Public Works Equipment Storage Building. This is a 2,400 square foot facility. Some of you may remember we had previously designed this project. We have built the pad. We have relocated the fence. We relocated utilities in 2018. Just to give you a little bit of cost reference, in 2009, we built when we were building the community center, we built the Parks and Rec maintenance facility. It's 2,400 square feet now. It's a little bit different. It does have some finished conditioned space in it and has 2 lean-tos in it, but I thought it was a good reference for the amount of square footage and the size that you may see, because you have, everybody's been to that location. So it is a much-needed facility. It is a facility, our existing maintenance building was built in 1987 by Mr. Don Horton, who was the town manager at the time. It's been over 35 years. We've seen significant growth in the Public Works Department since then. Some of our concerns are clearly safety. When we try to egress and put equipment in and protect from weather, we do not have appropriate egress paths. We're constantly moving equipment around for my fleet mechanic to make room to make repairs. We got storage at multiple facilities. It is just time for us to make that investment. It's kind of like it was time for us to make that investment transition from the police station to our current station in town hall here. It's time to make some investment at Public Works. There's several of you that probably have never been to a Public Works facility. I would love to extend an invitation to you to walk that. I'd like to show you that. It's one thing for me to sit here and tell you about the challenges we have, but for me to walk and show you those challenges and let you speak to some of my staff, I think that's when you'll get the greatest understandings of some of the challenges we work through daily. So my invitation is extended today to each and every one of you to come walk with us. Contact myself or Mr. Moore, and we'll be glad to arrange something for that to give you a better feel for where it's going.
I know that several of the commissioners have been asking for tours of the facilities, so thank you for that invitation, since up until this point, we haven't been invited to do so.
COVID has put a little bit of restrictions on a few things we wanted to do for several of you new commissioners. I think now is the appropriate time when some of those things being led up is to get you out and about and show you some of our facilities and show you some of our challenges and some of the things we're blessed that you have given us. So, like I say, work with Joe or call myself, and we'll be glad to do individual tours, group tours, whatever works best for this group. But we currently invite everyone to our location. Any questions? I guess we'll stop there and pause a moment. Okay, hearing none. We'll talk about a couple of the items like Joe mentioned that are unfunded. Just to give you a little bit of reference, that picture was taken in 2007, right after we purchased this building. That is Baker Roofing, putting a new roof on the structure here. That was, for those who wasn't here, the first project we did on the police building and the town hall building was place the roof because they were leaking. So tried to stop some of the water infiltration that we inherited. So those roofs went on in 2007, late 2007, early 2008. Couple of the unfunded pieces that we were just unable to fund with this year's budget. We talked about a little bit a moment ago about the existing maintenance facility that we have at Public Works. It's basically remained untouched over the last 34 years, and it's just needed some general repairs and stuff. We've listed a few of these here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them, but if you do come to the tour, we can talk a little more about that. But they're estimated at about $260,000. Couple of other items that are unfunded, some filling station upgrades. We're currently working on software. It runs the pedestal and dispenses gas to our police, our fire, and all our town vehicles from 2004. We've got pedestals that are 2009 and 12 with a typical useful life for 10 to 12 years. So it's just time to make some investment into our filling station. A couple other items to look at is we'd love to do some seal coating and what we call preservation maintenance on asphalt parking lots and stuff. We think there's also some aesthetic benefits. And then as we continue to grow, we need to look at maintenance yard expansion at Public Works. Future needs that are out there that are coming in the coming years. Community Center has 10 HVAC units. They were all put in 2009. They're getting to be at 13 years old, so we're hitting that useful life again. That currently is estimated at about $165,000. Public Works shop roof has a warranty of a coating on it that expires next year. If we did some of the renovations mentioned on the earlier slide, that would take care of it. But if we broke it out and did it separately, the Public Works roof recoating would be approximately $35,000. Maintenance building at the Parks and Rec facility needs some coating work done on it. And then we'd also like to see ultimately a town hall dumpster pad. And that wraps up my capital facilities presentation. Be glad to answer any questions. And like again, love to extend the invitation to come to Public Works.
Thank you.
Didn't you originally propose like a non-enclosed shelter?
Yes, sir.
And then came along and said it needed to be enclosed.
Yes, sir.
But my thinking was that it was bigger than a 2,600 square foot footprint. Am I wrong on that?
They were very similar in square footage. I know, and just to refresh your memory, we were looking at an open three-sided facility. As we got closer to that, we done some site long-range planning and stuff and recognized that our administrative building would have to go where we were proposing this building. As you know, you want to turn this building where it's facing against the north wind, and so the wind and snow and rain is not blowing on the equipment. We were unable to accomplish that. And so that's when we shifted and changed to go to an enclosed building and change the location.
Yeah. Okay, I just was thinking it was bigger than
Yes, sir.
2,600.
24, but yes, sir.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, I know, it's immaterial.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions, concerns? Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
All right, good evening. Tonight, we'll talk a little bit about general fund balance. First, going to start off with a sort of review of June 30, 2020 numbers, then kind of roll into some projections for June 30, 21. If you have any questions throughout, just holla, just let me know. As I said, first of all, we're going to look at June 30, 2020. If you look at your CAFR, this is on Exhibit 3, page 26, also known as the balance sheet, is where you can find these figures. First of all, total fund balance at June 30, 2020 was a little over $12 million. Of that, a little over $10 million was unrestricted. What's unrestricted is the committed, assigned, and unassigned. Just a refresher, committed, these are things such as stadium, capital improvements, fleet. These are portions of fund balance that were put into quote-unquote reserves for specific uses. They're put in there by put in or taken out by ordinance or resolution. To give you that exact number, that yellow portion is about $828,000. The assigned portion is the lighter green. That's the $1.9 million that was appropriated in the FY21 original budget. And then the unassigned portion is kind of the free of any other restrictions or commitments. Was almost $7.3 million, almost. And then our policy is 50% of unrestricted, or excuse me, it must be 50% of projected expenditures. Well, 50% of our original FY21 budget was the $6,777,000 that you see there. When you're talking about fund balance as it relates to our bond rating and what do we need to do to keep and achieve and keep a favorable bond rating, you see here the methodology from Moody's. Some of you have heard this before, but we'll go over it again. 30% of it is based on finances, and then 30% is based on the economy and the tax base. There's about 13 categories that make up this 100%. Most of them are 5 to 10. They're either 5 or 10% per of those 13 categories. Of the finance subfactor, 10% of that 30 is made up of fund balance as a percentage of operating revenues. To get a AAA worthy score, you have to have greater than 30%. This is basically the scorecard, like the scoring methodology for all of those categories. What you want to do here is you want to have a low score. To have a AAA score, you want to have like a 0.5 or so. So the higher your score, the lower your rating's going to be. So here's kind of, if you're AAA, you can be in between 0.5 and 1.5 in the category, and so on, as you see there. If you look at some of our history, this is the key component of fund balance as a percentage of operating revenues. And you look at the last 9 years, you see that dotted white line across there, that's the 30% that we need to achieve the AAA rating in this category. You'll see the red bars, those are our actuals for the last 9 years. You'll see we're well above the AAA requirement and the U.S. median. The U.S. median is that green line, green dotted line there that you see. This is an excerpt from our last issue or comment from April of 2020. It says the town has a robust financial position, which is a strength relative to an assigned rating of AA3. The fund balance as a percentage of operating revenues is far above the U.S. median. Moreover, Zebulon's cash balance as a percentage of operating revenues is far superior to other Moody's rated cities nationwide. So now we're going to take a look at my projections for June 30, 21 numbers. You see here, I have a projection of about 12.9 million on the total fund balance. Of that, about just shy of 11 million would fall into the unrestricted categories. And then based on the recommended budget of the 15 million and change, that would put our 50% floor based on our policy at about 7.5 million. Just a reminder, here is your current fund balance policy. The key components in that policy basically says your unrestricted fund balance is to be greater than 50% of your total projected expenditures. Again, that unrestricted fund balance, that is everything but the restricted. That's committed, assigned, and unassigned. And anything in excess of 50% can be appropriated for expenditure in that next year's budget. So if you come back here to this graph, you'll see about 3.4 is basically the unrestricted minus the fund balance policy. That leaves you about 3.4 million available for appropriation. Anybody have any questions?
How much of that 3, and I've seen it in here, but I can't remember. It was something over 2 million was appropriated, right?
Right.
Or projected to be appropriated.
I think it was 2.1.
I knew it was somewhere in that range. So then that would leave us
1.3.
pardon?
About 1 point. You mean above the
Remaining
yeah,
unrestricted fund
about
balance.
1.3 million, yeah.
Would be, I'm sorry.
1.3 million would be still available
Okay.
above what we
Okay,
have
I follow you.
appropriated.
Okay. One thing that I really want to look for, and I have not done it yet, is unrestricted, or is fund balance subsidizing operations as opposed to hard items, if you will, capital projects, that sort of thing. In other words, is it being used to fund any recurring type expenses?
Are you asking if we are?
If you want to answer it,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I think this year, I think typically, no. I think this year is 30,000, I think, of that is operating expenditure. But typically, there's not been any subsidy for operations.
If you could give us that information in that format, that, you know, here's what it is, here's, you know, what you're projecting to spend, here's what's projected to be left, and how those percentages, you know, relate, that would be very important to me. Now, I can dig through here and do it myself, but you probably got it more at your fingertips than I do.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, what happened in 2018 that caused our expenditures in 19 to go down, where our general fund balance dropped to 73?
Okay, yeah. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that in 19, that's when we did the installment purchase on the fire trucks. So lease purchase proceeds are counted as operating revenues, so that kind of skewed the revenues up and thus our percentage down.
Okay.
So that, I meant to mention that, but yeah, that's why it's a little bit, because we're typically around 85 to 90.
Other questions? I'm curious on this median number, is that for all municipalities regardless of size?
Yes.
Do you have available what the median number would be for, say, cities under 10? And I'll tell you why, and I really get hung up on fund balance, y'all know that. So, and I'm not trying to be combative, I just really want some information. One, I'm glad it's not proposed to go below 50%. But my understanding is that the smaller the town, usually the higher the fund balance is. Mm-hmm. So I don't think looking at this median number is fair in comparison of the market that we deal with. Right. I just wonder, because I know over time I ran across various small municipal governments that actually had over 100% in fund balance. I'm not saying that's what they should have or should not have done, but that's the way it was. So I'd kind of like to compare us more to something in our size. And I say under 10, I think that's a fair mark. But
I don't know how readily available it is. I can ask them.
I understand. And if it's not, I don't expect you to spend a ton of time on it. Yeah. But, you know, I want it on the table. My philosophy on fund balance has basically been to have a much higher fund balance because we had a much higher commercial tax base. Right. And you can lose a Glaxo and really get whacked, or you can lose a house and you can survive it very easily. So I personally, that's just my personal thing, tried to keep our fund balance somewhere in the ratio of commercial to residential. Now, I recognize that that's changing, and that's a good thing because we're better balanced. But I just want you to understand where I was coming from all these years on fund balance.
Yeah, I'll check with them. This is their number. These are Moody rated municipalities and everything, so
right.
They may have a breakdown of.
Well, I don't expect you to spend a lot of time on it, Bob. It'd be something I'd be very interested in.
I'll see what I can find out.
But, you know, if it's a lot of trouble, yeah, I can live without it. I just, you know. Okay. Other questions anybody have?
Bobby, you always act as the budget officer, right?
Joe's the budget officer.
Joe is, but you're the one that gives us the reports of the comings and goings of the $5,000 amonts.
In the month? Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, Don, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't really have any public, but for the record, I will ask, if there's any public that would like to speak? And seeing none, we'll move to questions, comments, and requests. Joe?
Let me just check it. Stacy, did you receive anything by email?
I did not.
So yes, any questions or comments or requests that we can try to answer tonight or come back at your third work session prepared to answer? We've already received some stuff that we'll come back with, but anything else?
All right, Joe, manager's report.
All right, so for your third work session, we will have a presentation on the Parks and Recreation capital projects. We'll give you a little bit of an update on where your Parks and Recreation master plan is, but you'll discuss your master plan and you'll receive that at your August meetings. You'll also receive at the third work session a presentation on streets and thoroughfares, and we are going to talk in a little bit more detail about an unfunded project, but we need to start sharing with you information on the results of the comprehensive market study that we initiated this past year. Of course, we'll have a time for public input as well, and then any questions, comments, or requests resulting from that meeting that we would then report back at the June 7th budget public hearing. That concludes our presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was efficient and fast. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned.